G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to arm you guys with the knowledge, the understanding and the perspective to figure out the true underlying and often hidden root cause of your neck, back or shoulder pain. And I think it's a really powerful conversation because as we talk about a lot on the channel, it's very, very hard to cure someone or solve someone's neck, back and shoulder pain if we aren't also trying to figure out what's caused it in the first place. And I think it's also important to talk about here is that we're not talking about the general sort of thinking around the onset of these issues. So I'm sure many people watching this have sort of felt that the cause of their problems are things like, perhaps you slept funny, or perhaps you moved the wrong way, or you bent or twisted the wrong way, or you did something that your body didn't like, but for some reason you don't necessarily have the exact thing that caused it sort of at the front of your mind. So it's sort of hard to understand what it might be. And we don't guess, but we tend to use like an educated guess based on what we think it might be. And there's another subgroup of people who have an absolutely obvious moment that caused their problems. But for you guys as well, it's still really important to understand that the moment that you notice your back pain, whether it's a gradual onset and you finally reach that threshold where you get some neck pain, shoulder pain or back pain, or you're someone who does something really obvious like moving a certain way, lifting a certain way, coughing and sneezing, or you do an activity or a movement that genuinely gives you that pain straight away. In those moments, we need to think of that pain not as the start of something new, but the last straw, based on a whole range of factors that we probably won't get into today, just for the sake of the length of the video. But the point I want to make with this video is I want to give you guys the understanding of how to figure out, once you've distilled all of the activities and the things that make up your life, how to sort of pinpoint the one or two things that are most likely causing your pain, or at the very least sets you up to have pain in a lot of cases. So please watch to the end of the video if you're really keen to have a better understanding of what might be the root cause of your pain. But before we get to that, as always, if you consider leaving a like on the video, if you do find this useful, and if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It's obviously a great way to help support us, but it does really help these videos and these ideas get out to more people, which is ultimately the goal of these videos. You want to sort of spread the word of the things that we're finding and discovering clinically that really help our patients, that we want to give to you guys to see if it helps you as well. And in most cases, I'd expect it hopefully does. So, and as always, in the comments below, please let me know what's brought you here. What is it? What sort of neck pain have you got? What sort of back pain do you have? What sort of shoulder pain are you dealing with at the moment? What answers are you looking for, basically? And we use the comments to sort of formulate some of the videos for future, some of the ideas for future videos. So if you're hoping to get a little bit more understanding and some more depth to a common problem, please let us know in the comments below. We can hopefully get that out for you as well. So with that being said, when we're talking about neck pain, shoulder pain and back pain, there's one really crucial idea that we need to sort of conquer or to overcome in order to figure out what it is. And as I touched on before, a lot of it revolves around this idea that as soon as you have pain, that is the start of your neck, back or shoulder pain. But what actually happens physically with the body in a lot of cases, if not all cases, is the moment that you notice your pain isn't the start of an injury or the moment something became damaged. It's more the moment that your brain and nervous system could no longer buffer and tolerate dysfunction. And for some people who have an acute onset where you go from nothing to something really quickly, you can breach that threshold quite quickly. For other people whose onset is a little bit more insidious or a little bit more sort of random, at least on the surface, you might sort of somehow get to that point at some stage and you have pain. But the common theme that links most neck, back and shoulder pain together is that there's often a really boring, less sexy, far less interesting root cause that sets those issues up to fail, that sets your body up to sort of get ever so closer to that threshold where you have pain. And whether you breach that acutely or you breach that sort of more slowly over time, there still has to be something that gets you to that point where your body's on the verge of becoming sore and injured. And that's, I guess, where this conversation comes into the picture. So when I'm talking to patients about trying to figure out what that root cause is for them, and I urge you to take the same approach, the best way to think about things is we want to take a really strong, deliberate look at not just the things that you do day to day, but how you do the things that you do during the day. And more importantly, what I found over the years is, at the very least, we want to formulate a ranking system of the things that you do the most, or at least the positions you get in the most, and start with the most common one, analyze that, hopefully tick it off, then move down the list of things until we find the thing that makes the most sense and connects the most closely to the symptoms and the physical dysfunction that you're sort of displaying with your injury or pain. So for most people are surprised to learn that the cause of their problems actually comes from the day-to-day stuff, not necessarily the nighttime stuff. And the reason for that is, for most people, we're asleep for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, which can be a lot or a little depending on the person, but that still leaves another 2/3 of the day, another 16 to 18 hours potentially waking hours to against gravity, interacting with the world, versus lying across gravity in a relatively supported position in bed. It's often a 2-to-1 in terms of the amount of time we spend awake during the day to the sleep time or the night time. So if we put that aside, the sleep aspect aside for the moment, and just focus on the things that are happening during the day, again, we want to focus on the things that you do most often and the positions that you're in most often as a starting point. And the reality for most people is the overwhelming majority of people spend the most time sitting, or in a sitting stationary shape. And that can be, as I said, sitting down at the computer, you can be at your laptop, you can be sitting up in bed using your phone, you can be sitting reading a book, you can be sitting driving, you can be sitting on the toilet, you can be sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast, lunch and dinner. There can be a whole range of things. If you play an instrument, you do arts and crafts, it doesn't matter what it is. One of the most common themes that we see throughout the day is sitting related. And it makes sense to at least start at that sort of, with that activity and analyzing the positions and the shapes that you're in, because we can start to uncover some really, really important clues as to why you might be having some problems. So if we're taking something like back pain, for example, when we're assessing you and we're trying to feel through the joints of your back, feeling through the muscles of your back, looking at the way that you move and how you load up your tissues, we often find that there's areas of added stiffness and tightness and dysfunction, or at the very least, when we find the epicenter of your pain and dysfunction, there has to be a reason why that specific part of your body has become a problem and everything else around it is relatively unaffected. And we've gone through this on the video on the channel before, but if you look at someone who slouches and sits down and relaxes, for example, most people often kick a hinge into their spine somewhere. So for me, as I sort of relax through here, and this is a legacy of my childhood years, my younger years, with horrible posture and horrible sitting habits, is that when I go to slouch, I get this hinge that occurs in my spine. So anytime that I sit, anytime that I'm in a stationary shape and I'm not conscious of my positioning and my posture, if I sink into this position, I'm consistently overloading that section of my back. And there's no surprises for me that in the past, when I've had some dysfunction in my back, most of it stems from that area. So if I'm trying to figure out the root cause of that one area of dysfunction that I have, and it's the same for you guys at home, if you know exactly where your pain is coming from, if you know where your tissue is stiff, whether it's the neck or the back or the shoulder, if you understand where the less than perfect mechanical sort of compromises are in that system, then when you match it up with stationary shapes, it's very likely that you'll find some overlap with those areas. So for example, when we talk about shoulder problems, there has to be a reason why some people have right shoulder pain or left shoulder pain. If you have bilateral shoulder pain, which again is pain on both sides, there has to be a reason why one side is worse than the other. And often we see that reflected in the positions and the shapes that you get into. So again, if you're on the computer and you're someone who likes to use the mouse a lot, it's very easy to get sucked into a posture where that sort of, for me, this right side gets drawn out and away from the body. The whole shoulder drops and rolls forward. The weight of the arm against gravity just asks a lot of the tissue in my neck and upper back and the back of the shoulder to stiffen and tighten to support that shape and deal with that constant change in load. And then over time, we get closer to that threshold for pain and dysfunction, so that we do something like moving the wrong way, coughing and sneezing for back pain, doing something and then getting pain. We're already at that threshold and that movement just tips us over the edge. So if we're understanding where that dysfunction is and we can relate it back to a position that you're in most throughout the day, then we can actually do something to fix your pain. Once we undo all the symptoms that you've accrued over the years or months or weeks or days, whatever it is, we then put you in a better position and make that easy for you to sustain over time. And then we can start to see that those stiffnesses and tightnesses, or the root cause of those issues, the underlying issues there, don't keep coming back when they're treated. So again, when we're talking about spinal stuff, we're looking at back pain. We always want to look at the position that your back is in during those stationary moments. Again, sitting is a big one. If you're someone who is adamant that you don't sit very much, standing, leaning over can be another one. If you're a chef, a cook, whether you're a physical therapist, you're someone who leans over for a living. If you are, if you work at a restaurant or you work at a checkout, and you're always sort of leaning over to do things, we're really interested in the position that you're in and where the load goes when you get into that position, in the hope that that explains why a specific area of your back has become dysfunctional. So for the back, we're really looking at those stationary sitting shapes by default, because they often make up the most common shapes and positions we get into throughout the day. Moving up to the shoulder, we want to look at any time that you get out of this shoulders back position and drop down or droop down, whether you're on your phone, whether you're sitting up in bed, whether you're playing an instrument, whatever that may be. Again, whether you're doing some arts and crafts, if you're driving a car and you're in a certain position all the time, there's always a perfectly good explanation for the dysfunction that causes your pain, because there has to be, otherwise it shouldn't be there. And then when we're looking at the neck, often we're looking at the shapes and the positions that you get into there. And again, there's no guesses, no prizes for guessing how this looks to most people. Depending on where the dysfunction is in your neck, there has to be a position or a shape that you might be getting into that's consistently challenging tissue over time, and it has to adapt and it becomes dysfunctional over time. So I think as I said, the overarching idea here is if you have any neck pain, back pain, or shoulder pain, a really useful exercise to do is just to take a moment to yourself, think about the things that you do most throughout the day. Think of whether that's work, what you do for recreational activities. When you're done for the day, are you someone who likes to sit on the couch? Or when you get into bed, are you up in that sort of half sitting, half lying position for a while until you lie down and go to sleep? We're really interested in the stationary shapes more so than the active movement orientated shapes, for one really simple reason, and that is the human body is designed to move and be used. It's designed to sort of move in and out of positions consistently, keeps everything sort of fresh and supple and strong. But when we get stuck in a shape for a period of time, which again is often sitting or something work-related or leisure-related, then depending on where those hinges are, depending on where the position of our tissue is, it often explains why certain areas start to become stiffer and tighter to cope with that, or as a result of that. And then we take that dysfunction into more interesting things, like the active things, like moving, again, sports and activities, everyday things, innocuous things that expose that dysfunction. So again, if you're looking to try and solve the aches and pains that you have, whether it be neck pain, shoulder pain, or back pain, you've really got to take a moment to take a step back, sort of analyze and understand what a good posture is. And I'll link some videos that we've done before on good posture up the top here. We need to consider what a good position is, and then match that up with the shapes that you're in throughout the day. And you should find that there is a genuine discrepancy between where you could be and where you end up and where you stay for a long period of time. And obviously we need to rectify that in order to see a resolution, a true resolution in your symptoms long term. Now, just to finish up on this video, the other thing that I wanted to touch on in terms of sleeping, and it's a big thing that comes up a lot when we're talking about aches and pains and what the cause of those are. And I just wanted to touch on this quickly because I'll put a video out on this a little bit later, going into more depth, but just to tease it a little bit, what we see a lot with sleeping, it's very similar to someone who does exercise and wakes up the next day with that delayed onset of muscle soreness, the DOMS phenomenon. Essentially, you've got exercise soreness from doing some heavy exercise the day before. So for a lot of people who feel like they've slept funny, which is often generated by or inspired by going to bed feeling good, but waking up with a sore neck or a sore back or a sore something for any matter, we're often left thinking that, well, we went to bed feeling good, so something must have happened in terms of position or a posture, or maybe your pillow's suddenly bad for you, or your mattress is finally worn down. or there's something about the sleeping position that you were in that caused your pain. And clinically, we see that there's actually more to that story, much like the exercise soreness, where the next day soreness is based on doing something that your body wasn't quite able to handle, or was a little bit more than its current threshold for capacity the day before. Morning pain, or random pain that feels like it's come from sleeping, is more often than not a legacy from something less interesting the day before as well. So again, we're talking about shoulder pain, neck pain, back pain from certain postures that you're in a lot, and what happens is that builds up. Your body's trying to recover and deal with that when you go to sleep, and you wake up with the consequences or a legacy of that dysfunction. So again, we'll go into that through a video in a little bit later on, a little bit down the track, but I just wanted to highlight that a lot of pain that people get or feel like they get from sleeping funny is more often than not actually a consequence of something from the day before. And again, it's not very sexy, it's not very interesting in a lot of cases, but if you're someone who's genuinely struggling to conquer your neck, back, or shoulder pain, you've got to take a look at the day-to-day shapes and positions that you're in and do your best to either hold yourself in better positions or orientate your environment with rolled up towels, ergonomics, all the things that will sort of force you to be in a better position long term. It's a really crucial point to get across if you're trying to conquer this stuff forever. So again, with that being said, I hope that was useful. It's a conversation that I probably have with almost 9 out of 10 patients that I would see clinically, at the very least with neck, back, and shoulder pain. There's that broader perspective that you've got to take with you. And once you can start to resolve that broader stuff, then it just opens up a clear path to freedom, or at least optimize what you've got going on. So again, if you went on to enjoy this, please leave a like below. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Let me know what you figured out. If hopefully this has inspired you to figure out what the root cause of your neck, back, or shoulder pain is. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say below. But also start a conversation with us. If you're not quite sure what it is, we can sort of prompt you on some of the questions that I would ask a patient clinically. It sort of leads them to figure out that sort of stuff for themselves. So I'd really appreciate that. Just let me know how it's going. And as always, subscribe if you are new and if you enjoy this content. But until next time, we'll see you soon. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you later.